A millionaire was putting up posters of his missing daughter when a woman said that the girl lived in her house. The shocking revelation changed their lives forever. A story of reunion and love that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment where you are watching from. The morning sun of May filtered through the yellow blossoms of the trees in Greenwich Village, creating golden patches on the still damp asphalt from the light drizzle. The characteristic aroma of the neighborhood, a mix of fresh coffee, bagels coming out of bakeries, and the moisture of the wet earth, filled the air as David Morgan, 42, walked with determined steps through the tree-lined streets of New York City's most famous bohemian neighborhood. His hands, accustomed to signing million-dollar contracts and shaking hands with other business people in high-stakes meetings, trembled slightly as he held a roll of posters and a bottle of glue. The impeccably tailored Italian suit, which usually gave him an air of unquestionable authority, now seemed merely an ill-fitting armor for the vulnerability he felt. His brown hair, always perfectly styled for meetings in the mirrored offices of Wall Street, was slightly disheveled from nervousness. David stopped in front of a lamppost at the corner of Harmony Street and Azpilicueta Street. With almost reverential care, he unfolded one of the posters. The colorful photograph showed a 7-year-old girl with honey-colored curly hair and bright brown eyes that sparkled like honey in the sun. Sophia, his daughter, the child he hadn't seen for 3 long years. Missing, Sophia Morgan, 7 years old, disappeared for 3 years, read the text in bold letters. Below, her photo from when she was 4 years old, still with that shy smile that used to light up the marble hallways of their apartment on the Upper East Side. The contact phone number and the promise of a reward completed the poster, which he had already put up in hundreds of places throughout New York City. "My daughter," he murmured to himself, gently running his fingers over the image before applying the glue to the back. His voice, which commanded meetings with dozens of executives, now came out as a whisper laden with pain. David was known in the corporate world as an unrelenting man. Owner of Morgan Developments, one of the largest construction companies in the country, he had built his empire through iron determination and an almost obsessive ability to control every detail of his business. Luxurious buildings in Westchester, exclusive developments in Miami Beach, commercial complexes in Washington, D.C., his architectural signature was spread all over the United States, but all that willpower, all that power, all that fortune estimated in billions of dollars had proven useless in the face of Sophia's disappearance. 3 years ago, after a heated argument about custody, his ex-wife Sarah had simply vanished with the child. One morning he woke up, and they were no longer there. The nanny found only a note. "Don't try to find us. Sophia is better off away from you." Since then, David had hired the best private detectives in the country. He had offered rewards that could buy mansions. He had used all his political and business contacts to mobilize the search machine. But Sarah and Sophia had disappeared, as if the earth had swallowed them whole. "She must be so big now," he murmured, carefully sticking the poster on the lamppost. 7 years. She must be losing her baby teeth, learning to read properly. The familiar sounds of Greenwich Village began to fill the streets. Young artists walked by with portfolios under their arms, heading to studios. The smell of bagels wafted from a food stand that had set up at the corner. Children played in the small gardens of the low-rise buildings characteristic of the neighborhood. Every child he saw made his heart race for a second, a hope that always quickly faded. David had developed an obsessive routine. Every morning, before heading to the office, he spent 2 hours putting up posters in different neighborhoods of New York City. He always started in Greenwich Village, the neighborhood Sarah loved the most, where they used to stroll on Sundays when they were still a family. Then he moved on to other places, Chelsea, Tribeca, Soho, Brooklyn. places where a woman with a small child might try to hide. His friends, when they still tried to talk to him about it, said he should move on, that 3 years was long enough, that maybe it was time to accept reality. But David couldn't. He couldn't accept that his daughter, the girl who used to dance in his office while he worked, who loved building towers with the wooden blocks he brought from the construction sites, simply no longer existed in his life. "Excuse me, sir." The feminine voice made him lift his eyes from the poster he had just put up. A middle-aged woman approached with hesitant steps. She was about 45, with brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail, and wore a blue cleaning uniform. On her left arm she carried colourful aprons with seasonal decorations, probably on her way to some seasonal decoration job. "Yes?" David replied automatically, trying to hide his irritation. He was used to being interrupted by people who recognized his face from business magazines or who wanted to ask for some favour related to his ventures. The woman looked back at the poster, then at him and back to the poster. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the aprons on her arm. "Sir," she began, her voice heavy with an emotion that David couldn't immediately identify. That little girl lives in my house." The world stopped. David felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. The glue bottle slipped from his hands and shattered on the asphalt, spilling the white substance across the ground. The noise of the street, cars passing, people talking, music coming from shops, everything became a distant echo. What did you say?" David's voice came out hoarse, almost inaudible. The woman took a deep breath, looking directly into his eyes. There was kindness in that gaze, but also concern and something that seemed like fear. "The girl in the photo, sir. She's been living with me for 6 months. I found her abandoned in front of the General Hospital one December night. She was alone, scared, not speaking to anyone." Her voice choked. "I tried to find her family, reported it to the police, but—" David couldn't hear the rest. His knees buckled, and he had to lean against the post to avoid falling. 3 years of desperate searching, and his daughter was just a few kilometers away, living with a complete stranger. Is Sophie okay?" The questions tumbled out, laden with an urgency that made his heart race uncontrollably. The woman nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "She is fine. Yes, sir. She is eating well, going to school. She's a sweet girl, but very quiet. Her name is Sophie, indeed. It's just that—" She hesitated. What is it?" "She doesn't talk about what happened before, and she is afraid of men in suits. Whenever she sees someone dressed like that, she hides behind me." The irony of that information hit David like a punch to the stomach. His own daughter was afraid of men like him. The journey to the east side of New York City had never seemed so long for David. Sitting in the back seat of his armored BMW, with the driver navigating through the heavy traffic of the East River Parkway, he watched the urban landscape gradually change. The mirrored buildings and wide avenues of the central area gave way to simpler constructions, row houses, small shops with colorful signs, and narrower streets. Mary Grace, that was the name of the woman who had changed his life in a matter of seconds, was sitting next to him, visibly uncomfortable with the luxury of the vehicle. Her calloused hands contrasted with the beige leather of the seats, and she kept the seasonal decorations carefully folded in her lap, as if they were a protective shield. "How long have you been working in the Greenwich Village area?" David asked, trying to fill the tense silence that had settled since they left the bohemian neighborhood. "About 15 years, Mr. Morgan," Mary replied, using the surname she had read on the sign. "I work cleaning the commercial building on Harmony Street. I wake up at 4 in the morning every day to get there by 6. It's far from home, but the pay is better than the jobs here in the East Side." David did a quick calculation in his head. 2 hours of commuting each day, waking up at 4 in the morning, salary probably not much above minimum wage. And this woman had taken in his daughter without knowing her, expecting nothing in return. "Do you have family?" he asked, genuinely curious about the life of the person who had cared for Sophie. "I have 2 children, sir. Mark is 17 in his senior year of high school. He dreams of going to college for information systems. He's very smart with computers. And Lily is 15 in her freshman year. She helps take care of your daughter when I'm working." Mary's voice slightly choked when she spoke of Sophie, and David noticed how quickly she corrected herself. It was obvious that the woman had grown fond of the child. "And their father?" David asked, immediately regretting the invasion of privacy. Mary looked out the window, watching the simple houses pass by quickly. "He died 8 years ago. Work accident on a construction site, ironically for a construction company." She turned to him with a sad half-smile. "I hold no grudges, sir. I know that not all of you businessmen are the same. But since then it's just been me and my kids." Silence returned to the car. David thought about his own life, the ease with which he solved problems through money, the safety net his fortune provided, the distance between his reality and that of this woman who worked 14 hours a day to support her family. "This is our street, sir." Mary pointed to a narrow alley with small, colourful houses. "You can stop at the corner, please." The driver parked the BMW, which immediately caught the attention of some children playing in the street. David got out of the car and was hit by a wave of sensations. The smell of home-cooked food coming from open windows, the sound of televisions on, children shouting and laughing, country music softly playing from some backyard. "This way, Mr. Morgan." Mary guided him through a small passage. "Our house is the one with the green gate." The house was small, but impeccably cared for. The green-painted iron gate had small pots with plants hanging. The simple facade was painted light yellow, and there was a small garden in the front yard, basil, parsley, and green onions growing in repurposed paint cans. "Mom, you're back!" a teenage voice shouted from inside the house as Mary opened the gate. A 15-year-old girl appeared at the door. Lily had curly hair like her mother, expressive eyes, and a warm smile. Behind her, a tall, skinny 17-year-old boy watched the scene with curiosity and a hint of suspicion. "Lily, Mark, this is Mr. David." Mary made the introductions. He is Sophie's father." The transformation on the faces of the 2 young people was instantaneous. Lily brought her hand to her mouth, surprised, while Mark crossed his arms and frowned. "Her father?" Lily asked. "But Sophie said she didn't have a father." "Where is she?" David interrupted, his voice laden with urgency. Mary hesitated for a moment. "She is in the backyard playing. But Mr. Morgan, I need you to understand. Sophie has been very traumatized by whatever happened before. She has nightmares. She has fear of strangers, especially men. We can't just—" "I just want to see her," David said, his voice breaking. 3 years, Miss Grace. 3 years without knowing if my daughter was alive or dead." Mark stepped forward, positioning himself protectively between David and the entrance of the house. "And where were you when she was abandoned at the hospital?" The young man's voice had a confrontational tone that surprised David. "My mother found her crying, hungry, scared. If you are really her—" "Father, why did you let this happen?" "Mark," Grace scolded her son, but David raised his hand. "No, he has a right to ask." David looked directly at the young man. "My ex-wife ran away with Sophie 3 years ago. I didn't know where they were. I searched everywhere, offered rewards, hired detectives. I never stopped looking." "So why did her mother leave?" Lily asked, her voice softer than her brother's but equally protective. David took a deep breath. How could he explain to unfamiliar teenagers the mistakes of a marriage that had crumbled? How could he tell about the arguments about Sarah accusing him of being too obsessed with work? About the final fight when she said he was trying to control even her breathing? We argued a lot. About custody. About how to raise Sophie. My ex-wife thought Sophie would be better off away from me, he admitted, feeling the weight of vulnerability. Maybe she was right. Daddy! The child's voice made everyone turn. From the backyard, a little girl had appeared at the back door of the house. David felt the air escape from his lungs. Sophie was there, just a few feet away from him. She had grown, her face lost the roundness of a baby, but her brown eyes were exactly the same. She wore a simple dress, blue with white polka dots, and was barefoot. In her hands, she held a clearly handmade doll. "Sophie," David whispered, taking a step toward her. The girl's reaction was immediate. She recoiled, running to hide behind Grace, clutching the woman's skirt as if her life depended on it. "No, Aunt Grace, no," Sophie said, her high-pitched voice filled with panic. "Not the man in the suit! Don't let him take me!" David felt as if he had been stabbed. His own daughter was afraid of him. His knees buckled again, and he had to lean against the wall to avoid falling. Grace bent down, picking Sophie up and whispering soothing words in her ear. "Calm down, my angel. No one is going to take you anywhere. Aunt Grace is here." David watched the scene, realizing how Sophie instantly calmed down in Grace's arms. The woman he had stumbled upon on the street was, at that moment, more of a mother to his daughter than he would ever be. She calls me Aunt Grace?" David asked. His voice choked. "She couldn't pronounce Grace when she arrived," Lily explained gently. "So she called her Aunt Grace. It stuck." David looked at his daughter, who was watching him cautiously over Grace's shoulder. 3 years of desperate searching, and now that he had found her, she didn't even want to look at him. "What do I do?" he asked, more to himself than to the others. "How do I make my own daughter not afraid of me?" The following days became a strange and painful routine for David. Every morning, after cancelling or rescheduling important meetings, something unthinkable in his previous life, he made the trip to the simple house in the East Side. He always arrived with gifts, imported dolls, expensive electronic toys, designer children's clothes that cost more than Grace's monthly salary. "Mr. David," Grace said one June morning, as they watched Sophie play in the yard with an empty cardboard box, completely ignoring the $1,000 doll he had brought. "Can I make a suggestion?" David, sitting uncomfortably on a plastic stool, the only place where Sophie allowed him to stay without hiding, nodded. "Maybe the gifts aren't the way to go," Grace continued, gently. "Sophie has lost trust in adults. She needs to see that you won't disappear again, that you won't hurt her. That takes time." "But I want to give her things," David protested, frustration tinging his voice. 3 years without being able to give anything to my daughter. I can buy anything she wants." "It's not about what you can buy," Mark interrupted, appearing at the back door with a glass of juice. The teenager had become less hostile toward David in recent weeks, but still maintained a protective attitude. "Sophie doesn't need things. She needs security." As if to prove the young man's point, Sophie left the cardboard box and ran to Grace, whispering something in her ear. "She wants to know if you're leaving soon," Grace translated, visibly uncomfortable. "She always asks that." David felt a pang in his chest. To Sophie, he was just another adult who could disappear without warning, as had happened with her mother. "Tell her I will come back tomorrow," David said, "and after tomorrow, and the day after that, every day." But empty promises were not enough. Sophie continued to hide behind Grace whenever he arrived. only playing when there was at least 2 meters of distance between them, refusing any gift he offered. The first change happened one afternoon when David arrived and found Sophie with a fever. The girl was lying on the small sofa in the living room, with compresses on her forehead, clearly unwell. "She caught a common cold at school," Grace explained, worried. "Lily went to buy medicine at the pharmacy, but—" "Let's take her to the hospital," David interrupted, already grabbing the car keys. "Mr. David, she'll be fine. It's just a common fever." "No." David's voice came out firmer than he intended. "My daughter is sick. We're going to the hospital, now." Grace hesitated, looking for Sophie, who watched the discussion with feverish, glazed eyes. "Aunt Grace," Sophie whispered, "can I go in the big car?" It was the first time she spoke directly about something related to David, even if she didn't mention him. The drive to the children's hospital was tense. Sophie was sitting on Mary's lap in the back seat, and David kept turning around to check if she was okay. At the private hospital, where David was known for his generous donations, they were immediately attended to by the best pediatrician available. "It's just a common cold," the doctor confirmed after examining Sophie. "Rest, plenty of fluids, and fever reducer. In 2 days, she'll be running around again." But something had changed during that afternoon. Sophie had seen David genuinely worried about her. She realized that he cared about her well-being, not just her presence. "Daddy," she said softly as they were heading home, still on Mary's lap. It was the first time she called him Daddy since they had reunited. David felt his eyes welling up with tears. "Yes, Princess. Are you going to take Aunt Grace away from me?" "No." Question hit David like a lightning bolt. He finally understood. Sophie wasn't just afraid of being abandoned again. She was afraid he would take away the only stability she knew. "Never," David replied, his voice firm. "Aunt Grace will stay with you whenever you want." Mary looked at him in surprise. It was the first time David had relinquished control, putting Sophie's emotional needs above his own desires. From that day on, the visits changed tone. David stopped bringing expensive gifts and started bringing simple things: books to read to Sophie, drawing materials, ingredients to make cookies together in Mary's small kitchen. "Do you know how to cook?" Lily asked, surprised, when David showed up with flour, eggs, and cocoa powder. "No," David admitted, laughing, "but I can learn." The afternoon turned into a fun mess. David, still in his suit he had learned to come straight from work, tried to follow a cookie recipe that Mary dictated, while Sophie watched him with growing curiosity. When he miscalculated the amount of sugar and the cookies turned out salty, Sophie let out her first genuine giggle in his presence. "Daddy makes bad cookies," she said, but she was smiling. "That's true," David agreed, pretending to be offended. "I think I need help. Can you teach me?" Sophie looked at Mary, silently asking for permission. With an encouraging nod, she approached the kitchen counter. "You have to sift the flour first," Sophie said seriously, demonstrating with Mary's small sifter. "Aunt Grace taught me." David followed her instructions with exaggerated concentration, making Sophie laugh when he pretended not to know how to crack the eggs properly. "Not like that, Daddy," she protested, taking his hand to show him the correct technique. It was the first time Sophie had touched him voluntarily since their reunion. David felt as if he had won the lottery. Mark, watching from the kitchen door, whispered to his mother, "He's not what I imagined." "What did you imagine?" Mary asked. "I don't know. More arrogant, more rich snob. But he seems like he really wants to get to know Sophie, not just possess her." Mary nodded, watching David patiently let Sophie lead the recipe, even when she insisted on adding colourful sprinkles to the chocolate cookies. "He's learning," Mary murmured, "just like all of us." When the cookies finally came out of the oven, slightly crooked but delicious, Sophie insisted that David try one. "Is it good?" she asked anxiously. "It's perfect," David replied, and for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't lying about something related to his happiness. That night, when David said goodbye, Sophie did something no one expected. "Daddy," she called him when he was already at the gate. "Yes, Princess? Are you really coming back tomorrow?" "I will. I promise." "Then, can I make a drawing for you?" David had to lean against the gate to keep from falling to his knees right there. "I would love to receive a drawing from you, Sophie." As the BMW drove down the narrow street, Mary watched Sophie waving from the window until the car disappeared. "Aunt Grace," Sophie said, still looking at the empty street, "why was I afraid of Daddy?" Mary picked her up, carefully choosing her words. "Sometimes when bad things happen to us, we get scared that they will happen again. But not all people are the same, my angel." "Daddy won't leave me alone in the hospital again?" The question revealed more than Sophie had shared about what happened before Mary found her. Mary felt a wave of anger towards any adult who had abandoned such a small child. "No, my love, your daddy will never leave you alone again." And that night, for the first time since she arrived at Mary's house, Sophie didn't have nightmares. July arrived with the characteristic dry cold of New York winters, and brought with it a discovery that would change everything. David had insisted on doing DNA tests to legally formalize Sophie's custody, even though in his heart there was no doubt. Dr. Henry Adams, the family lawyer for over 15 years, had discreetly organized everything. "David," Dr. Henry said over the phone on a cold Monday morning, "I need you to come to my office today. We have the test results, but there's something else you need to know." The lawyer's serious tone made David immediately cancel an important meeting with Japanese investors. In the luxurious office on Park Avenue, with a panoramic view of the city, Dr. Henry greeted him with an expression that mixed relief and concern. "Sophie is your daughter, without a shadow of a doubt," the lawyer began, handing over the documents. 99.9% genetic compatibility. But David, there's something about Mary Grace that we discovered during the tests." "What do you mean?" David frowned, flipping through the technical papers. "She has a rare genetic condition called Mayer-Rokitansky syndrome. It's a congenital malformation that prevents her from having biological children. She could never have gotten pregnant." David looked up from the documents, confused. "Why is this important?" "Because it explains a lot." Dr. Henry leaned forward. Her instant connection with Sophie, the way she embraced her without hesitation. Mary probably always knew she could never be a biological mother. When she found Sophie abandoned, it wasn't just charity, David. It was the maternal instinct she could never express. David leaned back in the leather chair, processing the information. He remembered how Mary looked at Sophie, the tenderness in her gestures, the way the girl naturally sought refuge in her arms. "There's more," Dr. Henry continued. "I hired a private investigator to track down Sarah. We found her, David." David's heart raced. "Where? How is she? Why did she abandon Sophie?" "She's been in a rehabilitation clinic in Aspen for 8 months. Severe substance dependence, cocaine and alcohol. Apparently the problem started shortly after Sophie was born, but she managed to hide it for years." David felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Sarah had always been a controlled, elegant woman, seemingly balanced. How had she hidden such a severe addiction for so long? "Postpartum depression evolved into dependency," Dr. Henry explained. "According to medical reports, she tried to treat herself several times but always relapsed. The escape with Sophie was a psychotic break. She genuinely believed you were going to steal the girl from her. And Sophie? How did she end up alone in the hospital?" "Sarah had a severe crisis last December. She left Sophie with her mother, who you know never liked you, and was rushed to the hospital. Sarah's mother, Mrs. Smith, apparently decided she couldn't care for a 6-year-old and abandoned her at the hospital. David clenched his fists, feeling a rage he hadn't experienced in years. She abandoned my daughter, a 6-year-old child. She left Sophie at the entrance of the children's emergency room on a rainy night with only a small backpack and a note saying she had no family. It was Mary who found her when she arrived for the night shift at the hospital. Silence settled in the office. David thought of Sophie that night, scared, alone, not understanding why the adults who were supposed to protect her kept disappearing. Where is Mrs. Smith now? She moved to the countryside, to Riverside. From what we gathered, she's facing serious financial problems, lost her house, living with a sister. David stood up, walking to the panoramic window. Down below, New York City buzzed with its 10 million inhabitants, each with their own dramas and tragedies. And somewhere in that vastness, his daughter had spent 6 months recovering from abandonment in the arms of a stranger who had become her salvation. "Dr. Henry," David finally said, "I want to sue Mrs. Smith for abandonment. David, she's a 72-year-old woman in a vulnerable situation. She abandoned my daughter." David's voice echoed through the office. "Sophie could have died, could have been kidnapped, anything. I understand your anger, but think carefully. A lawsuit will expose Sophie to interrogations. We'll dig up the entire traumatic history. Do you really want her to relive that?" David took a deep breath, trying to control his fury. Dr. Henry was right. Protecting Sophie was more important than punishing Mrs. Smith. And Sarah? When does she leave the clinic? The doctors estimate another 6 months of treatment. She wants to see Sophie, David. She knows her daughter has been found and is asking for a chance to redeem herself. Absolutely not. David's response was immediate and categorical. David, legally, she lost the right to be a mother the moment she abandoned our daughter with a woman who left her in a hospital. Sophie is finally recovering, finally starting to trust me. I won't allow Sarah to traumatize her again. Dr. Henry nodded, understanding David's position. "There's one last thing," the lawyer said. "Mary Grace, she needs to know about the legal situation. Technically, she could be sued for wrongful appropriation, even though she acted in good faith." "What?" David turned abruptly. "She saved my daughter. I know that. You know that. Anyone sensible knows that. But legally, she should have handed Sophie over to Child Protective Services immediately, not tried to create an informal custody situation." David thought of Mary, waking up at 4 in the morning, working 14-hour days, spending her own money on clothes and food for Sophie, offering unconditional love to a traumatized child. "Then protect her," David said firmly. "Do whatever it takes. Mary Grace cannot be penalized for saving my daughter. I can work on that. If you formalize the custody and publicly acknowledge that Mary acted in Sophie's best interest, we create a positive precedent. Do it today." That afternoon, David arrived at the East Side home with his head full of information and his heart heavy. Sophie ran to greet him, a huge progress from the early days, and he picked her up, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo in her hair. "Daddy, are you sad?" Sophie asked, touching his face with her little hands. "A little bit, Princess, but it's not your fault. Aunt Grace said that when we are sad, a hug helps." Sophie hugged him tightly, and David felt some of the day's tensions dissolve. Regardless of all the legal and emotional complexities of the situation, that moment, his daughter offering comfort, was pure and simple. "Mr. David," Mary approached, drying her hands on her apron. "Did something happen? You seem worried." David looked at her, this woman who had transformed his life and Sophie's without asking for anything in return. How to tell her about the tests, about the medical condition that explained her generosity, about Sarah and Mrs. Smith? "Mary," he said carefully. "I need to talk to you. Mary, we need to talk about some important things. About Sophie, about the legal situation, about what we discovered." Mary nodded, a shadow of apprehension passing through her eyes. "Is it about taking Sophie away?" she asked softly. "No," David replied immediately. "It's about making sure no one ever takes her away from those who love her." And in that moment, seeing the relief on Mary's face and feeling Sophie relax in his arms, David knew he was no longer fighting to get his daughter back. He was fighting to protect the family she had found. August arrived with a biting chill and brought with it the worst financial crisis that Morgan Developments had faced in 2 decades. David was in his office on the 35th floor of the commercial building on Park Avenue when he received the call that would change everything. "David, we need to talk urgently." The tense voice of Edward Sambrana, his minority partner and CFO, echoed through the phone. "The Japanese have cancelled the investment, all $800 million. David felt the blood freeze in his veins. The residential complex project in Westchester depended entirely on that capital injection. It was 6 luxury towers, 1,000 apartments, 5 years of planning. "What do you mean they cancelled? Yesterday they were excited. The Asian crisis hit their group. They are cutting all international investments. David, without that money, we can't honor the construction contracts. We have 300 employees who depend on this project." David hung up the phone and looked out the panoramic window. New York City stretched to the horizon, its mirrored buildings reflecting the weak winter sun. His company had built dozens of those buildings, and now everything could come crashing down. "Mr. Morgan." Claudia, his assistant for 12 years, entered discreetly. "Your 3 o'clock meeting has been cancelled." "Cancel everything for the week," David said, running his hands through his hair. "I need to think." For the first time in 20 years of his career, David seriously considered that he might lose everything. Not just the money, he had enough savings to live comfortably for the rest of his life. But his company, his reputation, the jobs of hundreds of families, and worse, right now when he was finally rebuilding his relationship with Sophie. The phone rang again. It was Mary. "Mr. David, sorry to bother you at work." Her voice sounded worried. "But Sophie is asking if you're coming today. She made a special drawing." "Mary, David hesitated. How could he explain that he was facing the biggest crisis of his professional life? That he might not be able to provide Sophie with the financial stability he always imagined he could offer? "Of course I'm coming. I'll be there in an hour." The trip to the East Side had never seemed so long. David watched the urban landscape, thinking about how ironic life was. 3 years searching for Sophie, imagining that when he found her, he could give her everything money could buy. And now, just when she was starting to trust him, his ability to provide could disappear. "Daddy!" Sophie ran to greet him at the gate, as had become her habit. She was wearing a little yellow dress that Mary had sewn, simple but impeccable. "Look what I made!" She showed a colorful drawing, a small house with 4 figures in front, a tall woman, 2 teenagers, a little girl, and a man in a suit. "It's us," Sophie explained proudly. "Aunt Grace, Mark, Lily, me, and you, Daddy." David took the drawing with trembling hands. On the childish paper, he wasn't in a mansion on the Upper East Side or in a mirrored office. He was in a simple house next to a family that had welcomed him. "It's beautiful, Princess," he said, his voice choked. "Can you put it on the fridge at your office? I'm going to put it in the most important place in my office." Mark appeared at the door, coming from school. The boy had developed a grudging respect for David in recent weeks, especially after seeing him patiently teach Sophie how to ride a bike in the small yard. "So, Mr. David, how was your day?" The simple and genuine question from the teenager hit David unexpectedly. When was the last time someone had asked about his day without wanting something in return? It was complicated, David admitted. Problems at work? Mary asked, serving coffee in a small, simple cup. David hesitated. He was used to solving his problems alone, projecting strength and control always. But looking at those people who had welcomed him and Sophie without expecting anything in return, he felt an unexpected need to be honest. "The company is facing difficulties," he said carefully. "I might have to cut back on some things." "Are you going to run out of money?" Lily asked with the typical frankness of 15. "Not out of money, but maybe out of the company. Without the employees, we build things, and now we might not be able to build any more." Mark sat down at the kitchen table, studying David attentively. "That must be tough, having that much responsibility." "You have no idea," David murmured, taking a sip of the strong coffee Mary had prepared. "My dad used to talk about that," Mark said. "He was a construction foreman. He said the worst part wasn't the danger of construction, it was knowing that so many families depended on the work he could get." David looked at the boy with new attention. Mark spoke with the maturity of someone who had grown up understanding financial responsibility very early. "Your dad was a wise man." He was, and he always said one thing. "Mark, when you build something in life, build thinking about the people who will live there, not the money you'll make from it." The boy's words echoed in David's mind. When was the last time he thought about the residents of his developments, not just the profits? "Daddy," Sophie approached, climbing onto his lap, "if you lose the big job, can you work nearby?" "What do you mean, princess?" "The bakery owner said she needed someone to help. You could work there and come have lunch with me every day." Sophie's innocence made David laugh for the first time in days. The idea of leaving the mirrored buildings on Park Avenue to work in a neighborhood bakery was absurd and strangely appealing. "It would be nice, right?" he said, kissing her forehead. "And you wouldn't be stressed," Sophie observed, with the keen perception of children. "Sometimes when you come home from work, your eyes look sad." David realized that Sophie was right. For years, professional success had come with constant stress, a pressure he had accepted as normal. "Mr. David," Mary said softly, "can I ask you something? Why did you choose to build buildings?" The question caught David off guard. No one had asked that in years. "My father was a construction worker," he said slowly. "He worked his whole life on other people's projects. He always said that one day I would build my own buildings, that I would be the owner, not an employee." "And do you like it? Building?" David thought about the question. He enjoyed the financial spreadsheets, the negotiations, the power that came with success. But building? Creating spaces where families would live, where children would grow up? "I used to like it," he admitted, "in the beginning, when I still visited the sites, when I knew the workers by name. And now? Now I sign contracts in air-conditioned offices and only see the finished buildings in magazine photos." Silence settled in the small kitchen. Sophie had fallen asleep in David's lap, and he watched her breathe peacefully. "You know what I think?" Mark finally said. "What?" "I think you've lost the connection with what you do. My mom has been cleaning offices for 15 years, but she knows she's taking care of the place where people work. She takes pride in that." David looked at Mary, who was attentively watching the conversation. "It's true," he admitted. "I don't know when I stopped building for people and started building for numbers." "Maybe this crisis is an opportunity," Mary gently suggested, "to remember why you started." That night, David returned home with a buzzing mind. The luxurious penthouse in the Upper East Side, which had always been his symbol of success, felt empty and cold compared to Mary's cozy kitchen. He looked at Sophie's drawing, already framed and placed on his desk. In the picture, he was smiling, something he hadn't done in a long time in his professional life. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe the crisis wasn't an end, but a new beginning. And for the first time in weeks, David slept without nightmares about spreadsheets and lost contracts. He dreamed of small houses, lovingly tended gardens, and children playing in safe backyards. September arrived with the scent of blooming purple jacarandas lining the streets of New York City, announcing the arrival of spring. It was a particularly beautiful morning when Mary made a decision that would surprise everyone. She was preparing breakfast for the children when Lily casually mentioned a conversation she had overheard at school. "Mom, Sophie's teacher said she's very different," Lily said, spreading jelly on her toast. "More communicative, happier. She said she seems like a different child." Mary smiled, stirring the oatmeal that Sophie loved. It was true. The girl, who had arrived 9 months ago, scared and silent, was now humming in the morning, asking questions about everything, laughing easily. "Is it because of her dad?" Mark asked, adjusting his school uniform. "Partly," Mary replied, "but I think it's because she finally feels safe. She knows she won't be abandoned again." "What if he wants to take her away?" Lily asked, a concern that everyone shared but rarely verbalized. Mary stopped stirring the oatmeal, looking out the small kitchen window. David had become a constant presence in their lives. He came every day after work, helped Sophie with her homework, participated in simple dinners, and had even learned to change the shower head when it broke. "I don't know," Mary admitted, "but I know Sophie needs both of you now. She needs her father and she needs us." It was at that moment that the idea was born. A crazy idea, unthinkable for someone in her social position, but it made perfect sense in her heart. When David arrived that afternoon, Mary was more nervous than usual. Sophie ran to greet him as always, but Mary stayed in the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron repeatedly, a clear sign of anxiety to anyone who knew her. "Aunt Grace is acting strange today," Sophie whispered to David. "She burned the rice, and she never burns rice." David found Mary in the backyard, hanging clothes on a makeshift line strung between 2 trees. "Mary, is everything okay? Sophie said you seem worried." Mary hung up a small shirt of Sophie's before turning to him. She took a deep breath, as she always did before making important decisions. "Mr. David, I need to talk to you about something." Mary's serious tone made David prepare for bad news. In recent months, he had developed a constant fear that something would separate him from Sophie again. "Of course. What is it?" "It's about Sophie, about her situation." David sat on the small bench that had become his official spot in the backyard. "I'm listening." Mary sat beside him, her hard-working hands clasped in her lap. "Sophie is improving a lot. Every day she becomes more like the girl she must have been before everything happened." "Yes, I see that. It's amazing how she has changed." "But Mr. David," Mary turned to look directly at him, "I know you'll want to take her to live with you. It's natural, it's your right. It's just that..." "Just that?" "Just that I'm afraid the change might be too traumatic for her. Not because of you," Mary rushed to clarify. "You're a wonderful father. Anyone can see that. But Sophie still needs stability, routine, and..." "Me," David gently completed. Mary nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I know I don't have the right to ask for anything. I know she's not really my daughter. But, Mary..." David interrupted, taking her hands. "Sophie is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have you. You saved my daughter in a way I never could. So you understand my concern?" "I do. And I also understand that you don't want to be separated from her." Mary sniffled softly. "I'm sorry, Mr. David. I know I'm being selfish." "It's not selfishness, it's love." David fell silent for a few moments, watching Sophie play with a rag doll in the yard. The girl was humming softly, completely absorbed in her imaginary play. "Mary," he finally said, "I have a proposal for you, a proposal that might sound crazy." Mary raised her eyes, curious. "What kind of proposal? What if Sophie didn't have to choose between us?" "What do you mean?" David took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. The idea had been fermenting in his mind for weeks, but he hadn't had the courage to verbalize it. "What if you came to work for me, as Sophie's nanny?" Mary stared at him, surprised. "Mr. David, I don't understand." "You could live in my house, have your own room, your privacy. Sophie would have both, her father and you would have financial security, no longer needing to wake up at 4 a.m. to work as a cleaner. But what about my children? They would come too. I have enough space. Mark could attend a better school, prepare for college. Lily too." Mary fell silent, processing the proposal. The generosity of the offer was overwhelming, but something was bothering her. "Mr. David," she said carefully, "are you offering this because you truly want our company, or because you feel obligated?" The question hit David like a punch. Mary had touched on exactly the point he hadn't been able to articulate. I don't know," he admitted honestly. "At first maybe it was obligation, gratitude, but now you all are family, all of you. Sophie made this drawing where we are all together in a house, and for the first time in years I could imagine a life that wasn't just work and loneliness." Mary studied his face, searching for signs of insincerity or manipulation, but she found only vulnerability. "And your friends? Your family? What will they say about you living with a cleaner and her teenage children?" David laughed, but there was no humor in the laugh. "My family are business associates. My friends are people who want something from me. In the last few months, the only real family I've known has been here, in this house. Mr. David. And there's one more thing." David turned to face her completely. "My company is going through difficulties. It's possible that I may have to drastically reduce my standard of living. The penthouse on Park Avenue, the imported car, all of that may have to go. And how does that affect me? It means that maybe you aren't accepting to work for a millionaire. Maybe you're accepting to help a single father who is trying to rebuild his life." Mary fell silent for long minutes, watching Sophie play. The girl had built an imaginary house with stones and was arranging her dolls around an invisible table. "She's having a tea party," Mary murmured. "How do you know?" "It's what she always does when she's happy. She organizes imaginary parties for her dolls. You know her better than I do. I know her in a different way than you do. You are her father. That's special. That's irreplaceable. But You are the mother she chose," David completed. "And Sophie shouldn't have to choose between the parents she loves." Sophie looked at them at that moment, waving happily. "Daddy, Aunt Grace, do you want to come to the doll tea party?" David and Mary exchanged glances and both smiled. "We're coming, my angel," Mary shouted back. "Mary," David said softly, "you don't have to decide now. Think about what's best for you and your children, but know that regardless of anything, Sophie will always have you in her life. I promise you that." That night, after David left and the children were asleep, Mary stayed awake thinking. The proposal was tempting: financial security, better opportunities for Mark and Lily, the chance to continue caring for Sophie. But there was a fear she couldn't ignore. What if this changed the dynamic of everything? What if, living in David's house, she became just an employee, no longer the maternal figure Sophie needed? And there was another, deeper question. By accepting the proposal, would she be admitting that she couldn't adequately care for Sophie with her own resources? Mary looked out the small window of her room, seeing the timid stars shining over the simple neighborhood that had been her home for 20 years. The decision she would make would change not only her life, but the future of everyone she loved. October arrived with its warm mornings and sudden rain showers, typical of spring in New York City. David was in his office trying to save an important contract when Dr. Henry called with an urgency in his voice that made his blood run cold. "David, I need you to come to my office now. It's about Sarah." "What happened? Did she run away from the clinic?" "No, she wants to see Sophie, and she's no longer at the clinic." David immediately cancelled the meeting and rushed to Park Avenue with his heart racing. At the lawyer's office, he found a woman he barely recognized. Sarah was sitting in a leather armchair, visibly thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes, but there was a clarity in her gaze that he hadn't seen in years. "David," she said when he entered, her voice laden with an emotion he couldn't identify. "Sarah." His response came cold, controlled. "Dr. Henry said you wanted to talk to me. I want to see our daughter." "No." The refusal was automatic, instinctive. David couldn't forget Sophie running scared into Mary's arms, the nightmares she still occasionally had, the trauma of being abandoned. "David, I know you have every right. I don't hate you, Sarah, but I won't allow you to traumatize Sophie again." Sarah took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I've been clean for 8 months. Completely clean. I went through intensive therapy, support groups, everything. I know I made terrible mistakes." "Mistakes?" David stood up abruptly. "You abandoned our daughter. She was found alone in a hospital, Sarah. Alone." "I know," Sarah shouted back, tears streaming down her face. "Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I don't think about it every day? That I don't hate myself for it?" Dr. Henry gently intervened. "David, please sit down. Sarah has some important things to share." David remained standing but stopped pacing the office. "Go ahead then." Sarah wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. "When Sophie was born, something broke inside me. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I was sure I was a terrible mother. The doctor said it was postpartum depression, but I refused to accept it." "And you started using drugs?" "At first it was just an extra drink to help me relax. Then it was the anti-anxiety meds. Before I knew it, I was using cocaine just to function during the day." David finally sat down, the weight of the revelation hitting him. He had lived with Sarah for 4 years and never realized the depth of her suffering. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because you were always at the office, always busy with some important project. And I was scared. Scared that you would take Sophie away from me. So you decided to run away. I was sure you would find out. I was sure I would lose both of you. In my distorted mind, running away seemed like the only option." Sarah stood up, walking to the window. "But the drugs made everything worse. I became paranoid, thinking you were sending people to follow us, that you would find us and have me committed." "And Sophie? How was she during that time?" "Scared, confused. I tried to be a good mother, but there were days I could barely get out of bed. My mother helped, but—" Sarah paused, her voice breaking. "What did your mother do, Sarah?" "When I overdosed in December, she decided she couldn't take care of Sophie. She said she would put her up for adoption, that it was better for everyone." David clenched his fists. "And you allowed that?" "I was unconscious in the hospital. When I woke up 3 days later, my mother said she had resolved the problem, that Sophie was in a better place. She abandoned a 6-year-old child in a hospital." "I know. When I found out what she had done, I went crazy. I had a terrible relapse. That's when I finally accepted the treatment." Silence settled in the office. David processed the information, trying to separate anger from understanding. Sarah, Dr. Henry intervened. Tell him about the medical reports. Sarah returned to the chair, her hands still trembling. The doctors discovered that I have bipolar disorder. It wasn't just postpartum depression. It was an undiagnosed condition that worsened after Sophie was born. And how does that change anything? It changes that now I know what I have. I'm on the right medication, I'm in therapy, I have medical supervision. For the first time in years, I'm myself again. David studied his ex-wife's face. There was a serenity there that he hadn't seen in a long time. But there was also the weight of guilt and regret. What do you want, Sarah? I want to see my daughter. I want to apologize to her. I want her to know that she wasn't abandoned because she wasn't loved. She's 7 years old, Sarah. How do you explain abandonment and addiction to a 7-year-old? I don't know, but I know she deserves an explanation. She deserves to know that her mother didn't abandon her because she wasn't good enough. David thought of Sophie, how she had flourished in Mary's arms, how she was starting to trust again. She's doing well now. Sarah, she's finally okay, she has stability, she has people who love her. And I'm not one of those people? Sarah's voice broke. I know I've made terrible mistakes. I know I've hurt both of you in unforgivable ways, but she's my daughter too, David. Legally. I'm not talking about legality. I'm talking about love. Do you think I don't love Sophie? That I never loved her? David remembered Sarah pregnant, the nights they stayed up talking about Sophie's future, the first steps their daughter took that they watched together. I know you love her, but love isn't enough, Sarah. Sophie needs stability, she needs security, and I can't offer that. Can you guarantee that you won't have another relapse, that you won't run away again when things get tough? Sarah stood up again, looking directly at David. No, I can't guarantee that. Addiction is a disease, David. It's a daily struggle, but I can guarantee that now I know I have this disease and I know how to treat it. That's not enough. Then what is enough? Should I disappear from her life forever? Maybe. The harshness of the answer hit Sarah like a slap. She sat down again, her shoulders slumped in defeat. David, Dr. Henry intervened again, there's something else you need to know. What? Sarah is pregnant. David felt the world stop again. What? 3 months along, from a healthy relationship, with a man who knows all her history and is supporting her recovery. David looked at Sarah, noticing for the first time the subtle curve of her abdomen. You have another relationship? I met Paul at the clinic. He's a psychologist, works with addicts. We know it might seem too soon, but you're pregnant and you want to see Sophie. You want to create confusion in her life when you're expecting another child. That's exactly why. Sarah leaned forward. Because I know this might be my last chance to make amends with her, to show that I can be a better mother. And what if you can't? What if this... Can a child suffer too? At least Sophie will know that I tried, that I didn't give up on her. David stood up, walking to the window. Down below, New York City buzzed with its chaotic life and millions of personal stories. I need to think, he finally said. David, I need to talk to Sophie, and with Mary. Mary? The woman who took care of our daughter when you and your mother abandoned her. The woman Sophie calls Aunt Grace, and who became more of a mother to her in 9 months than any of us have been in years. Sarah received the words like a stab, but nodded. I understand. Just don't close that door completely, David, please. That night, David arrived home in East Side with a heavy heart. Sophie ran to greet him as always, but he hugged her tighter than usual. Daddy, are you okay? She asked, touching his face with concern. I am, Princess. Just tired. But when Mary saw him, she immediately knew something serious had happened. Mr. David, she said when Sophie went to play. What happened? And David told her everything. About Sarah, about the pregnancy, about the request to see Sophie. Mary listened in silence, her expressions shifting from surprise to concern, from understanding to maternal protection. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked. "I don't know. What do you think I should do?" Mary looked at Sophie, who was playing quietly in the yard, and sighed deeply. "I think we need to ask the most important person in this whole story. Sophie. Sophie. She has lost so much in life. The decision to reconnect with her biological mother should be hers, not ours." And at that moment, David knew Mary was right. Regardless of his own fears and resentments, Sophie had the right to choose her own future. November arrived with the intense heat that preceded the New York summer. David had spent weeks trying to find the courage for a conversation he knew was inevitable. That Saturday afternoon, sitting in Mary's backyard, watching Sophie organize a doll party under the cherry tree, he finally decided it was time. "Sophie," he called softly, "can you come here? Daddy needs to talk to you about something important." Sophie left her carefully arranged dolls and ran to him, climbing into his lap with the confidence she had developed over the months. Mary, who was preparing a mango smoothie in the kitchen, approached discreetly, knowing her presence calmed the girl. "Daddy looks worried," Sophie observed, touching the wrinkles on his forehead. "Is it about work again?" "No, Princess, it's about your mommy." Sophie tensed instantly. Since arriving at Mary's house, she had avoided talking about Sarah, changing the subject whenever the topic arose. "Which mommy?" she asked quietly. The question hit David like a punch. Sophie had started calling Mary Mommy Grace occasionally, especially when she was sleepy or scared. "Your mommy, Sarah, the mommy you met first." Sophie curled up in his lap, and David felt her small body stiffen. Does she want to take me away again?" "No, my love. No one is going to take you anywhere you don't want to go, I promise." Mary leaned in, sitting in the plastic chair next to them. "Sophie," she said gently, "do you remember when you first came here and were scared of all of us?" Sophie nodded, still curled up in David's lap. "And do you remember how you became less scared when you saw that no one was going to hurt you?" "I remember. Sometimes adults get very scared too and do the wrong things. Your mommy Sarah was very scared when you two separated." Sophie lifted her head, looking at Mary with those brown eyes that seemed too old for her 7 years. Why was she scared? David took a deep breath. How to explain addiction and mental illness to a child? She had an illness in her mind, Princess, an illness that made her feel very sad and very confused. Like when I have a fever and say strange things. Similar to that, but for much longer. Sophie was thoughtful for a few minutes, playing with the buttons on David's shirt. "Is Mommy Sarah better now?" "The doctors say yes. She took medicine and talked to other people who help when someone is mentally ill." "And why is Daddy telling me this?" David exchanged a glance with Mary, seeking strength to continue. "Because she wants to see you, Sophie. She wants to talk to you." Sophie's reaction was immediate. She clutched David's shirt tightly, hiding her face in his chest. "I don't want to," she murmured. "I don't want to see her." "It's okay, Princess. You don't have to do anything you don't want to." "But can I ask why?" Mary said softly. "Why don't you want to see your mommy Sarah?" Sophie lifted her head, tears welling in her eyes. "Because she left me alone. I called for her in the hospital and she didn't come." David felt his heart break, imagining Sophie at 6 years old, scared and alone, calling for the mother who wasn't there. "She was sick, my love," he explained. "She was in the hospital too, trying to get better." "But why did she leave me with Grandma Smith?" Grandma Smith didn't like me." "What do you mean, Sophie?" The girl hesitated, as if revealing a secret. "Grandma Smith always said I was too much work, that it was my fault Mommy got sick. She said I would be in a better place, away from everyone." David clenched his fists, feeling a murderous rage against Grandma Smith. Mary took Sophie's hand, gently caressing it. "Sophie, my angel, nothing that happened was your fault. A child is never to blame when an adult gets sick." "But if I were nicer—" "No," David interrupted firmly. "You are perfect just the way you are. Mommy Sarah's illness has nothing to do with you." Sophie nestled in David's arms, processing the information. The backyard was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic and the chirping of birds in the cherry tree. "Dad," she finally said, "if I don't want to see Mom Sarah, will she get sicker?" The question revealed the depth of guilt that Sophie carried. David knelt down to be at her eye level. "No, Princess. Mum, Sarah's health depends on the doctors and her medication, not on you. You are not responsible for taking care of adults. But I take care of Aunt Grace when she gets tired." "That's different," Mary smiled. "You help me because you want to, because you like to help, not because you're obligated." Sophie became thoughtful again, rocking back and forth as she did when she was concentrating. "Does Mom Sarah have other kids?" David hesitated. Was it too early to talk about Sarah's pregnancy? "She's going to have a baby," he said carefully, "in a few months." Sophie's expression changed immediately, curiosity mixed with something that seemed to be relief. "A baby? A little brother or sister?" "That's right. Would you like to have a little brother or sister?" "I've always wanted one," Sophie admitted. "But I wanted it to be from here, from our family." "From our family?" Sophie gestured to include David, Mary, Mark and Lily. "Our family now, the family that doesn't leave." David felt his eyes fill with tears. For Sophie, her real family was the one she had found in the simple house in the East Side. "And what if," Sophie began hesitantly, "what if I wanted to meet the baby? Can I meet the baby without having to live with Mom Sarah?" David looked at Mary, who nodded encouragingly. "Of course you can. You can meet the baby, you can visit, you can be an amazing big sister, but you would still live here with us. Promise?" "Promise." Sophie got down from David's lap and went to her dolls, picking one dressed as a doctor. "This doll takes care of the others when they get sick," she explained. "But she doesn't live with them, she just visits." David understood the metaphor. Sophie was processing the idea of keeping a safe distance from Sarah while still maintaining some kind of connection. "Sophie," Mary called gently, "do you want to think a few more days about seeing your Mom Sarah? You don't have to decide now." "Can I ask something?" "Of course." "If I decide to see her, will you go with me?" "If you want, of course we will." Sophie nodded, returning to her dolls. For a few minutes she organized an elaborate play where one doll visited others in a different house, but always returned home in the end. "Dad," she said without looking up from the dolls, I think I can see Mom Sarah, but just a little bit, and you have to stay with me the whole time." "Are you sure, Princess?" Sophie stood up, walking over to David with a determination that surprised him with its maturity. "I want to tell her that I'm okay, that I found a good family, and I want to meet my little brother, even if it's just a little bit now in her belly." David picked Sophie up, hugging her tightly. "You are the bravest girl I know. And one more thing, Dad." "What?" "I want to give her a doll for when the baby is born." Mary approached, gently touching Sophie's face. "Why do you want to give her a doll?" "Because when I was scared, the dolls helped me. Maybe they will help the baby too." That night, after Sophie had fallen asleep, David and Mary talked on the small porch of the house. She's amazing, David murmured. The capacity she has to forgive, to try to understand. Children are like that, Mary replied. They forgive more easily than adults, but they also get hurt more easily. Do you think I'm doing the right thing, allowing this meeting? Mary looked at the timid stars that managed to shine despite the city's light pollution. I think Sophie needs this conversation to close a chapter, to understand that she wasn't abandoned because she wasn't good enough. And then she will decide what kind of relationship she wants to have with Sarah. She might want to visit her from time to time, or she might prefer to keep her distance, but it will be her choice. David nodded, knowing that Mary was right. Sophie had lost so much control over her own life. It was time to give her the power of choice back. Mary, he said softly, thank you for everything. For taking care of her, for teaching me how to be a real father, for... You don't need to thank me, Mr. David. Sophie is a gift in all our lives. And that night, looking at the small house where he had found true happiness, David knew that regardless of what happened with Sarah, he had finally found what he had always been searching for, a real family, built on love and not on money or social convention. December arrived with the suffocating heat of summer, and with it the date set for the meeting between Sophie and Sarah. David had carefully chosen the location, a small playground in Central Park, with plenty of open space and the safety of being surrounded by other families. Mary insisted on accompanying them, and Lily also asked to go, saying that Sophie would feel more at ease with her nearby. On the morning of the meeting, Sophie woke up earlier than usual. Mary found her in the kitchen, sitting at the small table, drawing with colored pencils. "You're up early, my angel. It's only 6 in the morning." "I couldn't sleep anymore," Sophie admitted, continuing to color carefully. "I'm making a drawing for Mom Sarah." Mary approached to see the drawing, a colorful house with many people in front, and a woman separated but connected by a dotted line to a small baby. "It's beautiful, Sophie. Can you explain it to me?" "It's our house," Sophie pointed to the larger group, "and there's Mom Sarah with the baby. The dotted line is because she doesn't live with us, but she is still family." The emotional wisdom of the 7-year-old impressed Mary. Sophie had found a way to visually process the complexity of her family situation. "And this doll?" Mary pointed to a colorful package on the table. "It's for the baby. Lily helped me wrap it yesterday." At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the group met in the park. David drove the BMW with Mary in the front seat and Sophie and Lily in the back. The girl held tightly to the wrapped doll and the drawing, but her eyes showed growing anxiety as they approached the location. "Aunt Grace," Sophie whispered as they entered the park. "What if I can't talk to her?" "It's okay, my love. You can say whatever you want, whenever you want. And if you don't want to say anything, that's fine too." Sarah was sitting on a bench under a tree, accompanied by a man in his 40s whom Mary assumed was Paul, her new partner. She wore a simple light blue dress that subtly accentuated her pregnancy, and her hair was shorter, styled in a way that made her look younger and healthier. When she saw David approaching with the group, Sarah instinctively stood up but controlled herself, remaining close to the bench. Her eyes filled with tears the moment she saw Sophie. The girl had grown so much since the last time they saw each other. Her curly hair was longer, tied back in a ponytail with a yellow bow that Mary had made. She wore a simple but immaculate dress and carried her small gifts with nervous determination. "Sophie," Sarah whispered when they were a few meters away. Sophie stopped behind David, observing the woman who had been her first mom. After a few seconds that felt eternal, she stepped forward. "Hi, Mom Sarah." The simplicity of the greeting made Sarah break down in tears. She knelt to be at Sophie's height, but respected the distance, not trying to force physical closeness. "Hi, my love. You are so big, so beautiful." Sophie studied Sarah's face closely, as if comparing it to her memories. "You don't look sick anymore," she observed. Sarah smiled through her tears. "I'm not sick anymore, Sophie, at least not like I was before. Now I take medicine and talk to doctors who help me. Like when I had a fever and Aunt Grace gave me medicine. Exactly like that." Sophie moved a little closer, still keeping a safe distance. "Mom, Sarah, I made a drawing for you." "You did?" Sophie carefully handed over the paper. Sarah received it as if it were the most precious treasure in the world, studying every colorful detail. "It's our family," Sophie explained. "You are here with the baby, and we are here in our house. But see? There's a line connecting us because we are still family," Sarah sobbed, covering her mouth with her hand. "It's the most beautiful drawing I've ever seen in my life, Sophie. And I brought a doll for the baby." Sophie showed the package. "It's a special doll. Lily taught me that when we give a doll to someone, it's like giving a little piece of our heart." Sarah received the gift with trembling hands. "Can I open it?" "Yes." Inside the wrapping was a small handmade cloth doll with yellow yarn hair and a blue dress. "Aunt Grace taught me how to make it," Sophie explained. "It took me a long time, but it turned out pretty. It's perfect. The baby will love it." Paul, who had remained discreetly away, approached when Sarah gestured for him. "Sophie, this is Paul. He is the baby's dad." Sophie studied the tall, gentle man who knelt to greet her. "Hi, Sophie. Sarah talks a lot about you." "Hi," Sophie replied shyly. "Do you take good care of Mom, Sarah?" "I do. And I will take good care of the baby, too." "That's good. Babies need care." The conversation flowed naturally for about an hour. Sophie talked about school, her dolls, and how she had learned to ride a bike in Mary's yard. Sarah listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine interest in the life Sophie had built. "Mom, Sarah," Sophie said at one point, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, my love." "Why did you leave without explaining?" The direct question hit Sarah like a dagger. David tensed, ready to intervene if necessary, but Sarah took a deep breath and answered honestly. "Because I was very confused, Sophie. The illness in my mind made me think things that weren't true. I thought that everyone would separate us, but no one wanted to separate us. I know that now, but at the time I couldn't think straight." Sophie nodded, processing the explanation. "And you won't get confused again?" "I might, Sophie. The illness I have is not curable, like diabetes or high blood pressure. But now I know how to take care of it. And if I start to get confused, I will ask for help right away." "Promise?" "I promise." Sophie moved a little closer, almost touching Sarah's knee. "Mom, Sarah, I want you to know something." "What is it, my love?" "I wasn't mad at you. I was sad, I was scared, but I wasn't mad." Sarah closed her eyes, tears flowing freely. "Thank you, Sophie. That means everything to me." "And one more thing." "Yes?" "I like my new family. Dad, Aunt Grace, Mark, and Lily. They take care of me and won't leave." "I know, my love, and I'm very happy that you have found such special people." Sophie looked at Mary, who had remained closely attentive throughout the conversation. "Aunt Grace said that people can love in more than one way. That I can love you as my first mom and love her as my mom now." Sarah looked for Mary for the first time since they had arrived. "Are you Mary?" "I am." "Thank you," Sarah said simply. "Thank you for taking care of her when I couldn't." Mary nodded, her own emotion contained but visible. Sophie is a special girl. It was a privilege to care for her. "Mom, Sarah," Sophie called her attention back. "When the baby is born, can I meet him?" Would you like that?" "I would. But I don't want to live together. I want to keep living with my family now." "I understand. And you can visit whenever you want, Sophie. The baby will be very lucky to have you as a big sister." When it was time to say goodbye, Sophie surprised everyone by giving Sarah a quick hug. "Bye, Mom Sarah. Take good care of the baby." "I will. And Sophie, I love you. I've always loved you." "I love you too, Mom Sarah. The way I can love now." On the way back home, Sophie sat quietly in the back seat, processing the afternoon. Finally, she broke the silence. "Aunt Grace?" "Yes, my angel? I think everything is all right now." "What do you mean? Mom Sarah isn't lost anymore, and I'm not lost anymore. Everyone is in the right place." David looked in the rearview mirror at his daughter, amazed by her ability to find peace in such a complex situation. "And you, Princess, where is your right place?" Sophie smiled, snuggling in the seat between Lily and the doll she always carried. "Here, Dad, with our family, with you guys." And at that moment, David knew that his daughter had finally found what every child deserves: a safe home where she could grow up surrounded by unconditional love. January 2026 arrived with the scorching heat typical of summer in New York City and brought changes that no one had anticipated. David was in his office on a muggy morning when he received a call that would change everything again. "David!" Edward's excited voice echoed through the phone. "You won't believe it! The Koreans approved the project!" David almost spilled the coffee he was drinking. "What Koreans?" "The consortium from Seoul that visited our works in Westchester last month. They want to invest $1.2 billion in a sustainable housing project. Affordable homes, David, with green technology, solar energy, water recycling systems." David leaned back in his chair, trying to process the information. 6 months ago, he was on the brink of bankruptcy, and now he was receiving a proposal that would not only save his company, but completely transform it. "Affordable homes?" he repeated. "Exactly. They saw our work and were impressed with the quality, but they want something different. Dignified housing for low-income families using cutting-edge technology. It's the future of construction, David." For the first time in months, David smiled genuinely, thinking about work, homes for families like Mary's, projects that would truly make a difference in people's lives. "Edward, schedule a meeting for tomorrow. I want to know all the details." That afternoon, David arrived home on the east side with an excitement he hadn't felt in a long time. Sophie was in the yard helping Mary hang clothes on the line, and Mark was on the porch studying for college entrance exams. "Dad!" Sophie ran to greet him, as had become her sacred ritual. "Aunt Grace made brownies. Want to try?" "I do. But first I need to tell you some news." The family gathered in the small living room. David looked at each face. Sophie curious, Mary attentive, Lily interested, Mark looking up from his books. "Remember that my company was having problems?" "Is it better?" Sophie asked, always direct. "It's more than better, Princess. We got a new contract, a very special contract." "What do you mean special?" Mark asked, closing his math book. "We're going to build homes for families like yours. Beautiful homes, with solar energy, with everything a family needs, but at a price that regular people can afford." Mary frowned, confused. "Mr. Morgan, I don't understand. Companies like yours don't build homes for people like us." "Exactly, and that was my mistake all these years." David sat on the small sofa, Sophie immediately climbing onto his lap. "Mary, in the past few months, you all have taught me more about family, about what really matters, than I learned in 42 years of life. And you've made me realize that building homes should be about giving people a place to live, not about making money." "And now you're going to do that?" Lily asked. "I will. And there's one more thing." David took a deep breath, looking at Mary. "Mary, do you still remember my proposal? For you to come live with me?" "I remember, Mr. Morgan, but, well, Now I have a better proposal. What do you mean? What if, instead of you coming to my house, I sold my penthouse and bought a new house? A house where all of us could live as a real family. The silence that settled in the living room was heavy with emotion. Sophie looked at David with wide eyes. A house of our own? For real? For real? With a big yard, with a room for each of us, with space for you to play and for Mark to study. And me? Lily asked. Where would I fit into this story? You would be my oldest daughter, of course, David replied naturally, making the teenager blush. Mark closed the book completely, paying full attention to the conversation. Mr. Morgan, are you serious? Completely serious. Mark, you're entering college for information systems in the middle of the year. Lily is doing well in school. Sophie is happy and stable. Mary is the best mother I know. I'm not Sophie's mother, Mary gently protested. You are, Sophie said firmly. You are my mom, Grace, and Dad David is my dad, and Mark and Lily are my siblings. We are a family. But Mr. Morgan, Mary hesitated, people will talk. A rich businessman living with a housekeeper and her children. Mary, David took her hands. In the past few months, I've learned that the only opinions that matter are those of the people we love, and you are the people I love. Lily. He got up from the couch and walked to the small window. And what about Mom Sarah? Where does Sophie fit into this story? Mom Sarah can visit whenever she wants, Sophie replied, and when the baby is born, he can play in our backyard. Sophie is right, David. Confirmed. Our home will always be open for Sarah and Paul. Sophie doesn't have to choose between the families she loves. Dad, Sophie said, turning in his lap, can I choose the color of my room? David laughed, realizing that for Sophie, the decision had already been made. You can choose the color, help decorate, and decide where to plant flowers in the garden. And can I have a treehouse? You can have a treehouse. Sophie clapped her hands, excited. But Mark still seemed hesitant. Mr. Morgan, are you sure? It's a big responsibility. We're a complicated family. David looked at the young man who had become like a son to him. Mark, you're not complicated. You're real. And I've spent my whole life surrounded by false things, selfish friends, convenience relationships, empty success. You've taught me what true family is. But what if it doesn't work out? Mary asked, her practical concerns surfacing. What if you get tired of us? Mary, David gently held her face. Do you think I could live without seeing Sophie run to greet me every day? Without Mark's mature advice, without Lily's smiles, without you taking care of all of us? Mary began to cry silently. Mr. Morgan, and there's one more thing, David continued. I want you to stop working as a housekeeper. I want you to dedicate yourself entirely to taking care of our family. But I need to work. No, you don't need to. Now you're my partner in life. Taking care of Sophie, helping Mark and Lily grow, looking after me when I freak out about work. That's the most important job in the world. Sophie got down from David's lap and went to Mary, climbing into her lap. Aunt Grace, say yes, please. Mary looked at her. Children. Mark nodded encouragingly. Lily smiled through her tears. Mom, Lily said, I think this might be our chance to be truly happy. Are you sure? Mary asked. It's a big change. I am, Mark said firmly. Me too, Lily confirmed. And me too, Sophie shouted excitedly. Mary looked at David, seeing in him no longer the millionaire businessman she had met by chance one May morning, but the man who had become part of her family. Then yes. Yes, Mr. Morgan, let's build this family together. Sophie jumped off Mary's lap and started dancing around the small living room. We're going to have a house, our own house. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, David and Mary sat talking on the small porch, planning for the future. What will it be like? Mary asked. This new life? I don't know, David admitted. But I know it will be real. For the first time in my life, it will be completely real. And what if it goes wrong? It will work out, Mary, because it's built on true love. 3 months later, on a sunny April morning, the family moved into a spacious house in New Jersey with a large backyard, 4 bedrooms, and a cherry tree in the center of the garden, chosen especially by Sophie. Sarah visited in the first week, bringing her newborn son, Gabriel, whom Sophie welcomed with all the sweetness of an older sister. "He's beautiful," Sophie whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "And small." "You were like that when you were born," Sarah said, smiling. "Now he has 2 families too," Sophie observed wisely. "Mom Sarah's family and our family here." Mark passed the entrance exam for information systems at a local university. Lily excelled at her new school and discovered a passion for biology. Sophie flourished like a flower finally planted in fertile soil. And David discovered that true success was not measured in money in the bank, but in the laughter that echoed through the house every night, in the hugs he received when he came home from work, in the peace he felt, knowing he was building something far more valuable than buildings. At Sophie's 8th birthday party, held in the backyard of the new house, surrounded by the whole family, including Sarah, Paul, and little Gabriel, David looked around and finally understood what he'd been searching for his entire life. It wasn't power, it wasn't money, it wasn't recognition. It was this, a real family built on unconditional love, where each person was accepted just as they were. Sophie ran up to him, all covered in chocolate cake, her hair messy from playing. "Dad, this was the best birthday of my life." "Why, Princess?" "Because everyone I love is here, and no one is leaving." David picked her up, looking at Mary, who was organizing the gifts, at Mark, who was playing with Gabriel, at Lily, who was helping Sarah with the baby. "No one is ever leaving, Sophie. This is our family forever." And for the first time in his life, David Morgan knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be,